Good evening, everyone. Our last chat of the evening is with author Brian Katcher, who has written several books for teens, including Playing with Matches, Almost Perfect, and Deacon Lock Went to Prom. Welcome, Brian, and thank you so much for chatting with us tonight.
It is wonderful to be here.
So, your most recent book was Deacon Lock Went to Prom. Can you give us a little synopsis?
Sure. Deacon Locke is a boy who he was raised by his father, but his father was kind of a criminal and has kind of abandoned Deacon to the care of his grandmother, Jean. Now, Deacon, despite being nearly 7 feet tall, is very socially awkward. He has a hard time making friends, and he's never actually been on a date. Well, he's about to graduate high school, and he decides he is going to do one normal thing before graduation. He's going to ask a girl to go to prom with him. He has a friend he thinks will probably say yes. The thing is, he waits too long, somebody else asks her. Well, he's kind of bummed out about this, and he talks to his grandmother, Jean, about not going to prom. And Jean tells how she didn't get to go to her own prom because her boyfriend, who eventually became Deacon's grandfather, was serving in Vietnam at the time. Well, Deacon thinks, okay, I don't have a date for my prom. My grandmother didn't get to go to her own prom. Why don't I take Jean to the prom with me? He knows people are going to think this is kind of silly, but who cares? He's graduating. He did not count on two things. One is that his grandmother asked to take dance lessons, and their dance instructor is a young woman named Soraya, and Deacon really kind of falls hard for her, and he wishes she was the one he asked to the prom. The second is when he takes his grandmother Jean to prom, a lot of people record them on their phones, and it goes on the internet. All of a sudden, everybody wants to know who this young man who took his grandmother to prom is. He becomes kind of an internet celebrity. He becomes kind of famous. And Deacon's not used to all this. He kind of enjoys this, but at the same time, he'd also like to spend some quiet time with Soraya, which he can't now that he's famous. So that's the story of my most recent novel.
I loved it. I just wanted to be Deacon's best friend. Um, and
Well,
one thing I
thank
really
you very
enjoyed
much.
about, yeah, one thing I really enjoyed about Deacon is he seems really unaffected by his dad being kind of a con man and just like dropping him off with his grandma and like, oh, it's too dangerous now that you're old enough that for my scams and things like that.
I originally tried to have Deacon's father involved in the book, but realized he was just a superfluous character. Gene was all he really needed in his life.
Yeah, I really like how Jean and Deacon take care of each other. So like, he really considers her his best friend.
Well, thank you much. I appreciate that.
So the aspect of him becoming a minor celebrity kind of really changes his life. And I get that because I think that any teen that had any some sort of success and became any sort of minor celebrity um, would be affected by that. So it ends up working out for him because he actually realizes what's important. Like, what was your take on how Deacon should deal with this in the story?
I, I didn't expect Deacon to fall into the world of celebrity. I didn't think he was somebody anybody was going to remember in a couple of years. It's kind of depressing when I look back to the teen stars from when I was a teenager and look, well, he's dead and he's dead and he's dead. I was glad to let Deacon experience it for a while, but realize that's not the path of life he really wanted to go down.
Yeah, it was a sweet book, and I just can't tell you enough how much I was like, oh, I would be his best friend. He's socially awkward. I think that's completely endearing, and uh, just I love the characters, and I felt like they were very realistic while I was reading this.
I appreciate that. A friend of mine, author Anthony John, says good characters can carry a weak plot, but a good plot cannot carry weak characters. So it makes me happy. Wanted to be friends with Deacon. I find that to be a very high compliment.
So we were talking a bit before our chat about how you're a librarian, during the year. So how do you find time for writing?
Well, the secret to success in writing is the same as the secret to success in college: don't sleep. I drink a lot of coffee, and my daughter and wife are generally early to bed, where I'm up around past midnight, and I just can afford to sit in my office and write. And by write, I mean play video games online. I am very easily distracted, even worse so that high speed internet has become a thing. I want to Google a bunch of trivia about movies I saw 30 years ago. Fortunately, as a school teacher, I do have summers off, so that gives me a lot of time to write. It's just as with anything you're passionate about, you got to make a little time. And I'm lucky my family understands that sometimes I will have deadlines and I'll have to say, I just need a little alone time right now. And it's just a matter of forcing yourself to do it.
And when did you start writing? Did you start writing early or?
You know, I talk to a lot of writers, and they'll always say, "Yeah, I was writing from when I could hold a pencil." But honestly, I never wrote a single creative thing until I was 25, and I was living down in Mexico at the time. And my girlfriend had just told me, "By the way, I'm moving to Germany. Adios." So there I was, all bummed out, broke south of the border, and there couldn't have been a better time to just start writing. And that's where I started writing, playing with matches, broke in Mexico, angry at my girlfriend. And I never expected to ever finish that book, let alone have it published. But much to my shock, I actually made my way through it and wrote a complete book.
Yeah, and you mentioned playing with matches, and I have to say, I can't remember the main lead character, the female character, but
Melody.
yeah, Melody. What I loved most about her is the fact that you would think that somebody with, burn scars or something that makes them different might be willing to kind of take what they can get as far as friendship or and she does not subscribe to that. She's just like, I'm a person and you should treat me well. And I really like
Well,
that.
while I was writing that, I had initially planned, and spoiler alert here, that Melody and Leon would get back together at the end of the book. But as I was writing, I thought, no, he treated her really, really bad, and she's, at least initially, not going to come scampering back when he says, I'm sorry. He's lucky she's willing to be his friend again, and he realizes he that's what he's got to take. So, yeah, I wanted the book was, I guess, more about her growth as a person than Leon's.
Yeah, I think it really showed. And that was, I think, really positive for teens to see. It's like everybody has value and worth and should be treated with respect, regardless of, any differences that they have.
That's that's the ideal world. I would love it if more people could do that.
Definitely. So what's your writing process like?
My writing process. Okay. Come up with some kind of idea, kick around in my head for a couple of months, start graphing out characters, and I kind of figure out how the book is going to end. Then, there's two schools of thought in writing. There's the plotters who want to know what's going to happen in every single chapter of the book before they even sit down to start writing. And then there's my school of thought, the pantsers, people who just write by the seat of their pants. I think, okay, here's my characters. I need to get from point A to point Z, go. And I just start writing. I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea how the plot's going to go. And by the time we get to the end, the book is usually gone off in a direction I never expected. The problem with writing like that is you're kind of resigning yourself to an extra rewrite. I'll get to page 200 and think, I know what should have happened on page 3. Well, too late for that now. There's no wrong or right way to plot a book. That's the way I feel most comfortable with it.
Yeah. What do you think is the most challenging aspect of writing?
Uh, there's a lot, but if it comes down to it, it's creating, I would say, unique characters that I'm not just plucking Leon from playing with matches and throwing him down in Almost Perfect or Anna and Zach, which is kind of a problem for me because the characters I write best are charming, nerdy, awkward guys. In just about all my books, that's how they turned out. In Deacon Locke, I really tried to make him a very different character. And when it came down to it, that draft, he was about as charming and likable as Frankenstein's monster. He was just not a Brian Katcher character. And my editor said, go back and do it the old way. And I did. And he turned out much more likable. So making characters people care about, but aren't the same person every single time.
Yeah, definitely agree that with that. Yeah, I have always enjoyed your male characters. I think there tends to be so many male characters in literature that are like kind of bad guys or more flawed than, you know, I don't know, necessary. And I've always really enjoyed that you have such good guys as your male leads.
Well, thank you very much.
So I have a bunch of like kind of inside the actor studio questions um, that are kind of silly. So what is
Let's
your
go for it.
favorite? Yeah, what's your favorite word?
Tyromancy, which is the art of predicting the future using cheese.
Never heard that before. You learn something new every day, right?
Uh, Ideally,
Your least favorite word?
my least favorite word. What? I hate that. I hate that.
What scares you?
Heights, absolute worst fear. Cleaning the gutters out just brings me to a standstill. Climbing up a ladder 2 stories, that is my Everest.
Oh yeah, definitely. What makes you laugh?
That's a hard one, but usually it's a book. Usually it's something somebody has written that where I'm not expecting a joke and it just comes out of nowhere. I like maybe more the drier type of humor where you think back a couple of minutes later and think, oh, I get it, I get it.
Yeah, I like really clever comedy and strategically placed jokes and things like that.
Right.
What's your favorite food?
The real authentic Mexican tacos that you could only get in Mexico, back on the corner stores where they have a big hunk of meat just hanging over the open fire. That was I think why I stayed in Mexico for 3 years.
The food? Oh my God, I know. I would never leave. It's like my authentic Mexican is definitely my favorite.
It was so good.
Yeah. So if you had to choose a career other than being a librarian or a writer, what would you do?
Up until college, I really wanted to be an archaeologist. I enjoy travel. I enjoy being outdoors. I'm meticulous, which is why I became a librarian. I enjoy research, again, why I became a librarian. I love history. I think alternate universe Brian would have been archaeologist.
That's very cool. What profession would you never want to do?
In college, for one day, I worked for a telemarketing company and really wanted to hang myself by the end of the day. I would never go back to that.
Oh yeah, I worked at FedEx for like in the shipping department for like 3 days, and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this.
There are just certain jobs that you think I'm actually kind of hurting society by doing this.
So I think it's very clear that you loved Mexico. Other than Mexico, what's your favorite place to travel to?
Just last week, I visited South Carolina, which was the 50th state I've been to. I've been to every state. Um, beautiful, beautiful, so many beautiful places I've seen. I've spent a summer in Israel, but I have to think probably at least the most beautiful place I ever went to was Alaska. Hands down, just absolutely gorgeous.
It is beautiful there. And also the like Pacific Northwest too. The Pacific Northwest all the way north to Alaska is so gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
What do you like to do in your downtime?
In my downtime, I generally spending time with my family. You know, I got work and I got writing. So when I don't have anything pressing, I like to spend time with my 12-year-old daughter. We went on a float trip this summer. Love to go camping and hiking. Before I became a father, I did a lot of community theater. I may get back to that once my daughter leaves home.
Hmm. Do you have any like distinct memories of an interaction in a library or with a librarian from when you were a child?
From when I was a child, you know, my mother used to take myself and my sister to the library all the time when we were little. And in retrospect, that was probably because it was free. But I really credit that with getting me interested in writing and books in general, becoming both a writer and a librarian. It was just very positive memories of going there and being able to check out as many books as I want. And now that my daughter's a reader, I get to do the same for her. That was, I hate to keep harping back on Mexico, but that was one of the hardest things when I first moved down there. My Spanish was very poor and there was very little to read.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's yeah, definitely. Um, I kind of lost, sorry about that. I lost my train of thought there. Um, so what have you read in the last year?
I got to do a little plug here. If you go to the website foreveryoungadult.com, foreveryoungadult.com, that is a book review site where I'm a blogger. You can check out pretty much everything I've read in the past 10 years there.
Wow. Is there any like standouts from this year that you want to give a shout out to?
Let me see. One I just finished reading the other day, The Wise and the Wicked by Rebecca Podos. Let's see if I can hold that up there. Very good story about a family of Russian girls that have a family curse that when they turn about 12, they have a vision of their death. So they know pretty much the circumstances and age that they're going to die, and they have to kind of live life with that hanging over their head.
Wow. I like that. I like that premise.
It was very well done.
So, who's your favorite fictional character? If you had to choose a favorite.
Favorite fictional character, probably Captain Yossarian from Catch 22. If any of you younger readers are not familiar with that book, it's about a World War II bombardier who's had one too many close calls. So he thinks, I'm going to get myself kicked out of the army. I'm just going to pretend I'm crazy, and I'm just going to act so crazy they'll have to kick me out. But the crazier and crazier he acts, he realizes nobody is noticing, and then he suddenly realizes nobody realizes I'm crazy because everyone around me is crazy. And if you've ever been stuck in a bureaucracy, like, I don't know, high school, that book might resonate with you. Catch 22 by Joseph Heller. That was the book I read. I was about 16, and I thought, yes, that's what I've been trying to say. That's it.
That's awesome. Like that resonates with you. And well, it's okay. So I was going to ask next what your favorite childhood book is. So was there something from when you were younger that you like absolutely loved?
The first book I could ever read on my own was Old Hat, New Hat by Stan and Jan Berenstain. It's the story of one bear's quest for a new hat, and just an ending of supreme irony, he leaves the hat store, spoiler alert, with the very hat he came in with.
Oh my gosh, I love Berenstain Bears.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So was it a conscious decision to write like books for teens? I always like to ask that out of authors that publish YA literature, like if it was purposeful or like they started reading and they were just like, oh, this is for a teen audience.
You know, it's interesting. When I was a teenager myself back in 19, there were not a lot of books for teenagers. Teenagers were not considered young adults, but older children. So the books for teens were very light and fluffy and very preachy.
Mhm.
So, about 20 years ago, somebody thought, hang on, teenagers want to read interesting books with good plots and well-developed characters about things that are relevant to them. And I'm kind of lucky that I kind of just got in on the ground floor of that. I didn't really think I want to write books for teenagers. It's just the plot I came up with took place in a high school. And as I continued to write, I continue to write about teenagers. One of my books, I tried to have it set at a college, and somebody told me, Ryan, you're just taking teenagers and shoehorning them into a adult setting. Just make them teenagers, and your book will be a lot better. So I just think that's the genre I happen to excel in.
Yeah, Amanda and I were actually talking about that earlier about how I tell my teens all the time they're so lucky because there are books for everybody now. Like you can see yourself in literature because there's so much variety. And I feel like, pretty much everybody's represented, which is amazing. But I do remember that growing up and there's like Sweet Valley High and like
So, yeah,
R.L. Stein Fear Street, and that was like the only thing you could read is those two things.
that was pretty much the way it was. They just didn't feel teens who were dealing with these very real, very adult issues should be able to read about other people experiencing these real adult issues. When I was doing research for Almost Perfect, which is about a transgender girl, I was interviewing a lot of people over the internet, and what a lot of them said was growing up in the 90s or 80s or 70s as a transgender person, they felt they were absolutely 100% alone, and there was no one else like them on earth, and there was no one they could go to with this. So I'm glad that that is changing, that teenagers of any sort, of any adults of any sort, can pick up a book and say, yes, that's what I went through. I'm not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. We just talked to Mason before you, and who identifies as non-binary, and his main character in his debut book is non-binary. So,
Which book is that?
I wish you all the best.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's really great. So would you actually, is there like an author that you would freak out about meeting in real life?
I would I would freak out if I met H.P. Lovecraft because he's been dead about 80 years. But honestly, since I became a writer, I've met a lot of very famous writers. I was at a conference once, and this gentleman came up to me and said, let you know, I really enjoyed Almost Perfect. And I said, well, thank you very much. What's your name? And it was David Levithan, who wrote
Oh,
Every
wow.
Day and Two Boys Kissing, and I just totally fangirled all over him. And I think he was kind of sorry that he had come up to me, but I was just, oh my God, I loved your book. Oh, Will Grayson, wow. So
Oh, yes.
it's
I
been a
know.
lot of
I'm
fun.
obsessed. That was such a great collaboration with John Green. I loved that. It was so funny, and I like it was amazing for them to write together. So I think he's like been doing a lot of editing, but I think he's actually coming out with another book. Like he did do another recently that was like kind of a sequel to like Every Day, I guess. But I think he has another one coming out soon, so I look forward to that.
Oh yeah. And
You
John
have
Green was supposed to be
Oh,
at that
sorry.
conference, but I was going to say John Green was supposed to be at that conference with him, but he was sick.
Oh, that's terrible. I
Yeah.
recently he was actually they did a 60 minutes interview with him. That was really interesting.
Nice.
Um so if your books were made into a film, do you have like an idea of who you'd want cast in the movie?
I tell you, I am so out of touch with who's popular these days. I can't intelligently answer that question. My pop culture references kind of into the mid '90s, though I would really like it if they could cast me in the author cameo as some teacher or parent of a friend, I would love that very much.
That is awesome. I love that. Do you have a favorite TV show, movie, or band?
Favorite TV show, movie, or band?
Yeah.
Um, I don't watch a lot of television, though sometimes I will binge watch, a series. Really enjoyed the Good Omens Netflix recently. That was very good. Stranger Things, of course. You younger folks don't know the horror of what it was like, where you could only watch an episode a week and had to sit through all the commercials. That was terrible. As as for movies, man, there are a lot out there. I don't know if I could give you a my top 50 in the amount of
Do you
time
have
we have
a
here.
favorite sci-fi film?
Favorite sci-fi film? Oh, John Carpenter's The Thing was pretty good. You may call that horror. If you're not familiar with that, it's about a bunch of scientists in this very remote Antarctic research station that's been infiltrated by an alien that can shift shape. So they really don't know who among them is a human and who is a alien in disguise. That was very creepy. Very good special effects for the time.
I know about that movie, but I've never actually seen it, so I definitely need to do that.
Watch it while you're alone in the dark.
That's the best way to watch scary movies.
Oh yeah.
I remember, oh my gosh, this might take you back, watching the Blair Witch Project by myself in the dark.
The Blair Witch Project. That's a good one. About the same time I watched it, The Sixth Sense, and then I walked home by myself, and I'm like thinking, okay, half a million people in the city, and I'm completely alone. And then I came home, and my roommate, who like never left the apartment, was gone, and that was nice.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I do like some horror, but I like psychological movies better, like when they mess with your head a bit.
Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, exactly. So what's on your bucket list?
What's on my bucket list, man? It's when I was a younger man, it was like I want to see every country of the world. Um, all that, and now that I'm 44, I just got a new furnace in the house, and that just gave me all kinds of happiness. But really, I look forward to seeing my daughter go off to college. She's getting bigger and bigger, and I'm just so proud of her. Like to do a lot more traveling with my wife, and I would really like it if I could get some more books published. I'm gonna keep doing this till they tell me to stop. So hopefully I got another 20, 30 years of writing ahead of me.
Perfect. That's a great lead into our next question, which is what projects are you currently working on?
Oh, I've got several in the fire right now. One that my agent is shopping around, and I really hope finds a home. It's Complicated. It's about a boy named Gordon. Gordon was born with deformed legs. He can only walk with leg braces and crutches. His parents are extremely, extremely wealthy, but Gordon doesn't have a lot of friends just because he's kind of bitter and kind of shy. Well, one day he runs into this girl, kind of literally runs into her, and she gets angry with him. But then he notices she starts following him around, showing up at his school, showing up at his house, announcing to people that she is his girlfriend, and getting him into all kinds of crazy situations where he's forced to get out of his comfort zone and become somebody confident, somebody he's never been before. And he's excited about this, but he's also terrified because this girl will say absolutely nothing about who she is or why she's hanging out with him, won't even tell him her real name. So he's just kind of rolling with the punches, hoping eventually she'll tell him what's up.
I like that. There's mystery and intrigue, but it also sounds
Thank
really
you.
funny too.
I hope so. It's
So we have two more questions for you. What advice would you like to give your teenage self?
give my teenage self. These are good years, but they're not the best years of your life. You have a lot of adventures ahead of you, and You idiot, there's a reason girls write their phone number near your yearbook.
That is excellent advice. And our final question is, do you have any advice for aspiring writers?
Aspiring writers, you're probably doing better than I was doing at the time. I wish I had started writing 20 years earlier than well, not 20 years earlier, I would have been five, but 10 years earlier than I had, because writing is something that the more you do it, the better you are at it. It's like playing a sport or playing a musical instrument. You have to practice, 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 and work at it. And if I had started writing when I was 15 instead of 25, I'd be 10 years ahead in my career. So keep at it and don't let the rejections get you down. It happens a lot. And I've known too many people who quit writing just because they got too many rejection letters. Remember, about 20 years ago, some editor picked up a manuscript and thought, Harry Potter, boy wizard, that's never going to make any money. No, thank you. And the rest is history.
Yeah, definitely. I love that story. I think J.K. Rowling was like a single mom who was like a waitress or
Mm-hmm.
something. I don't know. She was kind of struggling at that point.
Right, right. I mean, Stephen King, he was a high school teacher, and he threw away his first manuscript. He just gave up on it, and his wife fished it out of the trash and said, no, finish this.
Yeah, that's great. I love those stories. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for chatting with us tonight. We really appreciate it, and I love your sense of humor. It's so like it's so dry.
Well,
Reminds
thank you
me
very
of
much. It's been my absolute pleasure chatting here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
absolutely.